Judas Iscariot's betrayal of Jesus of Nazareth stands as one of the most infamous acts in human history, and to that respect might be the perfect example we can use to help explain why people betray one another. When viewed through the lens of the URANTIA book, this act emerges not as a moment of spontaneous treachery, but as the culmination of a long, complex unraveling of psychological and spiritual influencers. Far from being a mere villain, Judas is often portrayed as a deeply conflicted soul, whose inner turmoil and spiritual disconnection gradually led him to a decision that would haunt the ages. After all, it is said to have known Jesus was to have loved him, and such a defiant and malevolent act must have some reason associated with it. In 138:2.9, we learn that
Judas Iscariot was an only son of wealthy Jewish parents living in Jericho. He had become attached to John the Baptist, and his Sadducee parents had disowned him. Judas Iscariot was the only Judean among the 12 apostles.
he put it all on the line for John the Baptist. And as we will discuss later in this video, the first insult to injury stemmed from Jesus allowing John the Baptist to be harmed by Herod, not understanding the spiritual nature of Jesus' kingdom. For a better perspective, suffice it to say that it is said that having a fair bit of knowledge can sometimes be dangerous, because often the person then does not respect what they do not know. And it was known in 139:6.2 that Nathanael and Judas were the best educated men of the 12. Surprisingly, it should also be noted that the leader of the group wasn't either of the two intellectual apostles, with Andrew being promoted to chief apostle by Jesus, found in 181:2.17. And was acclaimed to be the best judge of men in general, found in 139:1.8. Contrastingly, we learn that revenge and having a poor understanding of man was something that was familiar to Judas in 139:12.6, stating,
Judas was an only son of unwise parents. All through his life, Judas had cultivated the habit of getting even with those whom he fancied had mistreated him.
From the outset, Judas was an anomaly among the 12 apostles. He was the only Judean in a group of Galileans, and coupling his higher education with his far-seeing predisposition, found in 139:12.5, he likely thought he was more capable than the rest of the apostles. In my mind, it was this far-seeing strategic mindset that always made Judas a perpetual threat to his perceived adversarial peers. In fact, the URANTIA book itself that has collected the mind records of Judas in that same 12.5 reference indicated that
money could never have been the motive for his betrayal of the master.
Judeans of that time were viewed as more sophisticated, educated, and politically savvy than the Galilean counterparts. Judas, conscious of this difference, harbored a subtle sense of superiority. He was intelligent, capable, and well-versed in worldly matters, and likely saw the value and potential influence of money. Yet this very distinction isolated him. While the other apostles bonded over shared backgrounds and mutual admiration for Jesus, Judas remained emotionally aloof, never fully integrating into the spiritual brotherhood. The URANTIA book describes Judas as a man who never really admired Jesus in his heart, which is encompassed in 177:4.5. He was drawn to the master, yes, but likely initially drawn by the authoritarian message John the Baptist brought, and not the patience and peaceful nature Jesus prized. Judas saw in Jesus the potential for political greatness, for messianic triumph, for the kind of worldly power that could elevate Israel and perhaps himself. But as Jesus continued to preach a gospel of spiritual transformation and divine sonship, Judas's expectations began to crumble.
He was a good thinker, but not always a truly honest thinker. Judas did not really understand himself. He was not really sincere in dealing with himself.
This dishonesty was not directed outward, it was internal. He deceived himself. He rationalized his doubts, masked his ambitions, and suppressed his growing resentment toward Jesus. This self-deception became a spiritual cancer, eroding his capacity for genuine faith and fellowship. Unlike Peter, who was impulsive but sincere, or Thomas, who doubted but remained loyal, Judas's inner world was marked by duplicity. He wore a cloak of discipleship, but beneath it simmered frustration, disappointment, and a gnawing sense of betrayal. This betrayal was not due to Jesus' direct actions per se, but by Judas's own unmet expectations. He wanted a material kingdom of power, but Jesus offered a kingdom of spirit. He sought exaltation. Jesus preached humility. This dissonance grew unbearable for a man cloaked in a false sense of superiority. Entrusted with the treasury of the apostles, Judas managed the group's finances with skill and fidelity. He was never accused of theft or mismanagement of his station, but his relationship with money was tinged with temptation. When the Sanhedrin offered 30 pieces of silver for information leading to Jesus' arrest, Judas may have in the beginning sought revenge for all the times Judas felt belittled or alienated, such as when Jesus failed to save his mentor, John the Baptist, in 157:7.2. When Judas received a public rebuke by Jesus during the costly ointment incident found in 172:1.5, and the final perceived offense being the ridicule he received due to Jesus choosing to ride a donkey into Jerusalem in 172:5.13. However, even after the disloyalty, Judas secretly wished that these events would force Jesus' hand to use his own material power to save himself. In other words, he later rationalized such an initial betrayal as a later strategic maneuver. A way to force Jesus' hand, to compel him to reveal his power and claim his material throne. In this speculative light, Judas's betrayal in many ways exhibits the very human oscillation, signifying the same emotional investment that signifies both hate and love. To reframe this for everyone, amicable divorces, I mean the real ones, are less frequent than you might think. Psychology reveals that there's often one party that wants a divorce or separation a little more than the other, signifying a lever and left personification. Consequently, love can very easily lead to behaviors of attempting to get an emotional reaction out of the former partner or simply to gain the satisfaction of winning over them. And for those of you that believe in unconditional love, let me remind you that if it's a family member that you have this unconditional love for, that's a condition, right? You don't just unconditionally love everyone. There are conditions. There are things people can do to have you stop loving them. We later justify these actions by demonizing a person or even business as best we can, such as what shoplifters frequently do. As a brief example, this big box store purposely has inflated prices. They finally owe me a discount. The URANTIA book places Judas's betrayal within a broader cosmic drama. The plot to kill Jesus, of course, was realized far before the behavior actually transpired. We learn in 179:2.3 that
Jesus began thus to talk to his apostles because he knew that his hour had come. Likewise, he knew Judas Iscariot had fully made up his mind to deliver him that night into the hands of his enemies. He fully realized that this traitorous betrayal was the work of Judas, but that it also pleased Lucifer, Satan, and Caligostia, the prince of darkness.
Judas's actions, though human in execution, aligned with these dark, nefarious forces, despite Judas never being aware with such likely support. Whether consciously or not, he became a pawn in a rebellion that transcended Earth for over 200,000 years. This cosmic dimension does not absolve Judas of responsibility, but it deepens the tragedy. After all, living faith or divine leading does not foster bigotry, persecution, or intolerance, found in 101:8.3. which is representative of a great deal of lower creature vestiges that we are meant to leave during our godly ascension. Judas was not merely a man who made a bad choice. He was a soul who, through spiritual neglect and emotional isolation, became susceptible to influences far beyond his understanding. His failure to anchor himself in truth and love left him adrift, vulnerable to despair and manipulation. But the key here is the self-isolation that he himself chose. After all, if you're too far up in your ivory tower, it is, of course, a very lonely place to reside. It's like that with individuals who accidentally choose to err, then purposely sin, which eventually leads to iniquity due to the notion that one truly believes that one's unrighteous behaviors are the right and only way. Unlike the other apostles, Judas never truly internalized the gospel message. He did not experience the transformative joy of divine sonship. He remained tethered to worldly ambitions, intellectual pride, and emotional instability. In the end, he stood alone, not just physically, but spiritually, stepping further away from God himself. As Jesus' hour approached, Judas's inner world collapsed. His betrayal, much like many of those who wish to betray one another, is typically not a sudden act of malice, but the final step in a long descent. A descent marked by missed opportunities for redemption, ignored invitations to fellowship, and a persistent refusal to surrender his ego. Applying this principle to the 21st century, it's been my experience that when people remain unfaithful to their spouses, it's the final nail in the proverbial coffin as an attempt to end the relationship. Even in the moments up to the betrayal, Jesus extended love to Judas. He washed his feet, shared bread with him, still offering a place at his table. These acts were not mere gestures. They were divine appeals to a soul on the brink of collapse. But Judas, blinded by his own narrative, could not see them for what they were. When Judas led the guards to Jesus' location and kissed Jesus in an act of betrayal, the tragedy was complete. The silver coins clinked in his purse, but his soul was bankrupt. When Judas realized the enormity of his actions, as he saw that Jesus would not resist, would not summon his angels, would not claim his material throne, Judas was consumed by despair and likely regret. The URANTIA book does not dwell on Judas' suicide. However, sees that as being one of the many pieces signifying Judas' remorse after the fact. He, after all, did not just betray the Son of Man, but a revelation of God. And in doing so, he had not only betrayed himself, but also our local universe, and of course, forever placed a shadow on the world of URANTIA. Judas Iscariot's story, as told through the URANTIA book, is not merely a tale of betrayal. It is a mirror held up to the human soul, a reflection of what can happen when intellect is divorced from spirit, when ambition eclipses humility, and when isolation replaces fellowship. Thank you again for watching today's video, your continued support, and I'll see you on the next one.